Hello everyone, my name's Dave, and this is part 5 of a video series where I'm going to show you how to create a tower-based defense game 100% from scratch using C++ and SDL2. In the last video, I upgraded the art, and previous to that, a spawning and pathfinding system had been set up that allows enemy units to be added automatically, move towards the center of the base, and disappear when they get there. In this part, I'm going to start adding turrets that rotate in circles with shadows that are always drawn on their bottom right. Let's start by thinking about the bare minimum requirements for the turrets to get them started, and we can add more features later. So far, the game doesn't have a turret class, so one will need to be created with some basic functionality, such as drawing it and allowing it to rotate. There also needs to be a way to add them to the level, and I think that the best way is to be able to place them with the mouse. The first thing I did was draw the art for the turret. I used the same technique that I did for the other images in the previous video. However, I saved the turret and its shadow as separate images so that when it rotates, the shadow won't change the side that it's on, but rather it will always be drawn down and to the right. I'm going to go into more detail on this later when I set up the code for it. Let's start getting the turret class set up. I've created a new class called turret, and I'm going to add some code that's very similar to what's already in the unit class. I'm going to start by adding a constructor, an update function, and a draw function. As you can see, there are a few errors that popped up, so I'm going to need to include a few things, just as I did for the unit class. I'm also going to add a few variables with private access for the position, angle, angular speed, and textures. Let's go to the CPP file. I'm going to set up the constructor so that it will set up the position, angle, and load the textures. I'm also going to initialize speed angular, which is a static variable that defines how fast the turrets rotate. Because we're going to need to convert between radians and degrees to measure angles, I'm going to add a class that I'll call math add-on for this. There's not really much explanation needed. It's just some basic math, but you can see what it contains in front of you. Of course, I'm going to have to include it in the turret class's header, and you can see that the error has disappeared from the CPP file that calls the angle degrees to radians function. I'm going to set up the update function, and for now it will rotate the unit clockwise at the angular speed, and if it gets above the equivalent of 360 degrees, then the equivalent of 360 degrees will be removed from it so that it stays within the interval 0 to 360 degrees. It's not necessarily a requirement to do that here. However, it's often good practice when dealing with angles. Next, I'm going to add the draw function, which is very similar to the one in the unit class. So I won't go into too much detail here. However, the main difference is that it uses the SDL render copy EX function rather than the SDL render copy function, because the SDL render copy EX function allows for the image to be drawn at an angle, while the SDL render copy function doesn't. I could copy this code and write it twice, once for the turret image, and again for its shadow. However, it's a lot cleaner if I split it into two functions. So I'm going to slightly modify the code to have an offset for the shadow. Let's add the draw texture with offset function to the header file as well. The turret class is progressing nicely, so let's add it to the game class. This means that it needs to be included in the game header. I'm going to create a list that will store them similar to how the units are stored, which means I'm also going to add a loop to the update function to update them, and another loop to the draw function to draw them as well. This is going great, but there needs to be a way to place them. Currently, there's some code to place units. For example, here in the process events function. However, because they're now created automatically by the spawners, it's not really needed anymore. So let's replace any code for placing units with code that places turrets. For the add turret function, it's going to be similar to the add unit function, but it's going to ensure that the turret is always in the center of the tile. Otherwise, it would look weird. For the remove turrets at most position function, I'm going to switch the code to modify list turrets rather than list units. This means that there's going to need to be a way to check if they are on the same tile as the mouse. So I'm going to create and add a new function called check if on tile. All it's going to do is cast the positions x and y values to integers and compare them to the input x and y positions. So that's quite a bit of code. Let's run the game and we'll try to place some turrets. Okay, very nice. They're looking good. They're being drawn and rotating as expected. Their shadows also look good because they're always drawn offset towards the bottom right corner. If I try to right-click to remove, then both the walls and turrets are getting removed correctly, which is excellent. The next step is to allow them to target and point towards enemy units. However, this is a good place to stop for this video, and I'll start working on that in the next one. All the source code is available on my website, link is in the description. I've also got a bunch of other games, code, and tutorials on my channel and website, as well as a course where I create a falling sand platformer game 100% from scratch. Feel free to check those out if you're interested. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you in the next one.